I will call this meeting to order then. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. For those of you listening in, hello and welcome. I'm Karen Fassell. I'm the president of the Municipal Review Committee Board of Directors. And we are going to start with, I think, initial roll call, John, of the attendees or the board. John is going to unmute himself and then he'll do that for us.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind reminder. So I'll run down through the list. Just please indicate that you're present. So Bob Butler.
Present.
Ralph?
Present. Yep.
Present.
Kevin.
Present.
Irene.
She has to unmute herself.
Oh, I saw her.
She's there.
Here. Okay.
Oh, great. Thanks, Irene. Dana. Are you there, Dana? You might be on mute as well. Great, thanks. And Kathy?
Here.
Tony?
Present.
Sophie?
Here.
And Karen?
Here.
Oh, terrific.
Thank you, John. So we'll start off, I think quickly, I would like to review sort of the protocols for the meeting and how we'll be doing voting, and then we can move right into the agenda. Just a reminder to our panelists, if you could keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking, that will cut down on the background noise and allow everyone to be able to hear who's speaking more clearly. And then, of course, the converse is true, is when you need to speak, you'll need to unmute your microphones. And that includes, obviously, for all of the votes that we'll be doing. As John indicated just before the meeting started, for every vote of the board, he'll be calling the roll and everybody will need to do a voice vote, aye or nay, for each item. So you'll need to be on your toes with your mute and unmute buttons today. For those of you who are listening in, we'll be using the Q&A feature that you should be able to see, find at the bottom of your screen for comments and questions. We will have a public comment period at the end of the meeting just before we go into executive session. But if you do have a question on a particular agenda item that we're addressing and you would like to type that in, we'll be vetting those and reviewing those as we go along as well. And I think that pretty much covers those administrative features. So we'll start with the second item on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any changes they need to see in the agenda? Anything, any additions or deletions? And I would say for our board members, you can raise your hands, visually raise your hands to let me know if you would like to speak or if you have a comment. And that way, at least I know that you're trying to unmute your microphone when you're working on saying something. So seeing no comments on the agenda, we'll assume that it is approved and move on to consideration of the minutes of the February 26, 2020 special meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. A second? I had a motion.
I'll second it.
Sophie had seconded.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Does anybody have any comments, questions, changes to the minutes of the February 26th meeting?
They were well done.
They
Very
were
well.
indeed. Thank you, Joelle. Okay, seeing no comments, I'll ask John to call the roll for a vote.
Bob.
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Hey, Ralph.
Yep.
Irene,
Press, oh,
Irene, I got you.
okay, thank you.
is that a yes, Irene?
Yes.
Great, thanks. And Dana? Are you there, Dana?
Yes.
Okay, great. Kathy?
Yeah.
Tony?
Yes.
Sophie?
Yes.
And Karen?
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
Okay, unanimous approval. Thank you, John. Moving on, we have the asset management report. So we'll call on George Aronson of Commonwealth Resource Management to give us an update and run us through the report that he provided to the board.
Okay, thank you, Karen. The usual format includes the pros up front and then the financial information in the tables in the back, including unaudited financials for the joint venture in table 1 balance sheet, table 2 cash flow. Just running through it very quickly. And I think this was mentioned in Finance Committee that at this point, all of the balances of the joint venture have been transferred to First National Bank with the exception of a small residual balance in the custody account as of the end of the quarter. So those numbers are shown in the tables and in the text. The custody account, and again, these numbers are shown as of April 1st, 2020. Custody balance included about $380,000, almost all of which was held at First National Bank. The reason it's 380 as of April 1st was because at that point, that the custody account was also used as the escrow account for the loan proceeds. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But since April 1st, the last $367,000 which run out of that. So the balance now is in the range of about $13,000 as the unencumbered balance. TIFI fund, and we had this report during Finance Committee, is about $7.8 million. Operating budget stabilization fund, about $5,000. And again, this has all been transferred over to First National Bank. The cash collateral account, which has had a minimum balance requirement of $3 million, which was waived in order to provide the loan of $1.5 million, now has an account balance of about $1.39 million. And that's held in the form of treasury bills, notes, and a money market fund. There is also right now showing on the accounts on the balance sheet of the book value for the site owned by the MRC, which includes and has been reconciled to include the last round of amounts payable on infrastructure and retainage payments, which would be held through the end of 2020. That's a separate board agenda item, which will be discussed at the end of this item. There are two recommendations, two items requiring addressing in the asset management report. The first is the distribution. To remind people that the board had set aside $1.5 million for 36 months of distributions, starting with the commercial operation date, which was November 1st. And that's basically $125,000 per quarter. The calculation is based on actual tonnages in the quarter. When we did the calculation for first quarter, the number is 121,858.07, which is less than the 125,000. And the first recommendation is to actually distribute that amount. the board can do it by transferring money from the tip fee stabilization account. The second recommendation is going to depend on a separate board vote on the last payments related to construction of the road and infrastructure. So that's an item 5. But in the event the board votes to approve that transfer, then the money would be also transferred from the tip fee stabilization fund to the custody account in order to make the payments. The only other thing I want to run down quickly is that I also, as part of the asset management report, include at the end a list of the reserve fund requirements and resources that are set forth in the appendix of the joining agreement. This is a quarterly report to the membership that in fact all the reserve fund requirements are being met or the resources have been allocated to meet them. And I think so that includes the $4 million minimum balance in the tip fee stabilization fund, the $1.5 million in the cash collateral agency account, and again that minimum balance of $3 million has been waived while the loan is outstanding. And the two other things to note is that if the $125,000 is transferred as been recommended, this will be the second quarter in which that transfer has been made. So that would pull down the $1.5 million reserve for such transfers for distributions to $1.25 million. And finally, when you run through the requirements and one's left, the amount of unencumbered funds in the tip fee fund and the custody account is about $2.7 million. So that's the overview. Happy to take questions. I I also believe there's going to be an update on the loan separately. So I don't know, should I do that now, Michael, or you want to do that?
I'm gonna in my report, I have an update of just like what I did in the finance committee, how many draws that we had, what the draws were used for, and then just totaling things up. So
okay, so right, the financials just show the loan balance and accrued interest and accrued repayment, but that'll be covered when in the executive director's report. So happy to have questions.
George, I didn't go over the interest or the cost in my report, just what the funds were allocated for to.
Okay, so as of March 31st, the MRC had accrued $8,125 of interest, and again, I also showed an accrual on the balance sheet of another $37,981 of reimbursement of costs at maturity. That's in accordance with the formula under which the MRC would get repaid the entire $112,000 of cost identified up front. About $67,000 was already paid when the loan was first closed. The remainder will be paid at maturity. So that there were questions earlier about when will the 112 be repaid. That's the split between close and maturity. Other questions?
Does anybody have any questions for George? George, I had a question.
Sure.
I know I've asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again. But the 1.5 million that's dedicated to providing the, what are we calling it? The $3 and $5 a ton payments. Where do those funds come from? Because we paid about 18 months worth of those payments before the commercial operations date.
Okay, we had always set aside the $1.5 million separately, starting on the commercial operation date. So in fact, the money that we paid in the 18 months before was what was allocated from unencumbered funds in the tip fee stabilization fund. And this 1.5 was clearly set out in the joinder agreements as one of the reserve funds that had to be set out. So in fact, we're keeping track of that. It's $125,000 a quarter. Fourth quarter 2019, there were only 2 months instead of 3 months. So that was $91.79.75. This quarter, it's $121.858.07. So the total to date, assuming that is approved, would be $212.37.82. And we'll just keep track of that against the 1.5 million as we go forward each quarter, update the board, and make sure that number is known, so that if tonnages increase rapidly, or if the amount distributed is more than had been anticipated, we'll see where that's going and we'll be able to react accordingly. So,
Thank you.
did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did also want to ask a question about the payments that we make to the flow control communities,
Mhm.
and whether or not MRC is supposed to be covering that cost after commercial operations.
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not specifically addressed in the joinder agreement, so I think it's an issue for board policy rather than a contractual matter. And I think that was the instruction last quarter, but obviously the board can reconsider that from time to time.
Sophie.
I think that this should be a board discussion. I don't understand why MRC continues to be responsible for paying this when Coastal is not taking waste that would otherwise be available to them. So I think that Coastal's arrangement is violating our flow control ordinances, and they should be on the hook for paying this, not us.
Thank you. I second that.
So I can add, I've been working on this over the last couple of weeks, and I can add a little to this. I've been working with George, and there's nothing concrete, but I did talk to Coastal, and then one of the major factors here is because the commercial waste is not coming into there. They're not getting the weight slips, so that this can so that the weight slips can be shared and that reimbursement can happen. So one thing we had discussed is we currently now, going off the 2017 data from what went into PERC, go off an estimate of commercial waste, which is around 23,500. And so either a couple ideas we had is Coastal can, or MRC, depending on where this goes, can seek to get those weight slips from the haulers that are currently doing it and taking it elsewhere. Or as Coastal's starting to gear up to take on commercial, with my last conversation with Shelby, is they can provide the weight slip. But another thing we talked about is where we have the data from what went into the what we're basing our dues off of, and what we're basing the distributions off of, the 23.5 and the different communities that's allocated to. We could give that number to those communities, and they could base their administration fees off the haulers off of those numbers from the data we have. So those are three things we're working on, but we don't have a concrete plan on anything yet. But it's definitely hit the top of the schedule we're working on, because it is something that I agree with all of you, that the MRC shouldn't be paying and can't continue to afford to pay, I don't believe.
Sophie?
So I don't know. I think that there might be a little bit of a game happening here where the waste slips are something that we got all the time before Coastal took over. This is not rocket science. I don't know why it wouldn't be really simple to make the change. All we need to do is get a bill, pay it, and bill people through.
Okay, so if you got a bill from Coastal, and I think you and I discussed this, Sophie, what you're saying, as long as you had the weight slips for your commercial, you would have no issues of passing that through to the hauler, but you just need to know that dollar, that weight amount.
I guess my point is if Coastal gave us a bill for, all they need to do is bill us for the weights, and then we can take the rest of it through. Right, Karen? I mean,
So we're talking about the waste that's not going to the facility, correct? We're talking about the commercial waste that's going to other venues right now.
Yeah, there's a small percentage of it going to the facility, but that's a very,
Right, and that's being
or they're
covered.
getting weight slips from a hauler that is bypassing, one of the haulers that is bypassing, and then there's a small amount of commercial that is actually going to coastal. But the bulk of it is not, and they're not getting weight slips for the bulk.
So my feeling is that, we're figuring out a methodology to calculate how much is due back to the flow control communities. We're figuring out a methodology to bill the flow control communities for the dues associated with that. I mean, I think we just use that same methodology and generate a bill to coastal to cover the administrative fees. That's really all we're talking about, is just that component, right, George? Not the $5, because that's supposed to be an MRC cost. We're talking about the administrative fees that the communities are missing out on.
That's correct. And I think the other part of this is that within the last month, we've seen a big change in quantities of residential versus commercial waste. With people staying home, more of the waste is residential and a lot less is commercial.
Yeah.
So the older data don't necessarily tell us what's happening today.
Correct.
That's going to make the numbers move around. But I think, it sounds like there are a couple of ways to address this issue, and if it's over the board, we can start going down this path.
Yeah, I think we should work towards the goal of generating an invoice to coastal for these fees from commercial operations, which is November 1st forward.
So Karen,
Hey, Kathy.
and I can't see you. My understanding is that coastal is billing for that money. So it should be there. There shouldn't be any reason why they can't pay us.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think what they're billing for is the very small little fraction of commercial they are taking and getting from Casella. And
Okay.
Is that your understanding, George? Mike?
I'm not sure of that. I know that I know waste management stuff is going to Juniper Ridge. So I believe they are billing that. And I know they're billing what comes into the facility. What Casella brings over to PERC or Juniper Ridge, I'm not sure if they're billing that or not. I don't believe they are.
Yeah, I mean, some of this goes to some contract issues and contract negotiation issues that might be best. And I looked to John to this, but that might need to be discussed in executive session.
Okay. Does anybody else have any
Yes.
questions for George? Okay. So it's been so long since I feel like we've had a meeting. Do we need to vote to accept that, or do we just move on?
Move the recommendation.
Oh, the recommendations, right. Thank you very much, Sophie. Appreciate that. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to accept and move the recommendations that George provided in his quarterly report. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll ask John to call a roll vote.
Thanks, Karen. Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Sorry, yes.
yeah, thanks, Ralph. Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
There she is.
Was that
I think I heard a
a
yes. I did. Was that yes, Irene? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Dana,
Dana, you're unmuted.
Yes. Did you get
thanks, Dana. Got it. And Kathy,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
There you go.
and Karen.
yes? Thank you, John.
Unanimous.
All righty. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we have an update on the Harold Boucher Way construction and road acceptance. And I believe, Mike, maybe we'll start with this, and I believe Tony is going to chime in.
Yeah, so I do have an appointment set up, and Tony, myself, and anybody else who would like to join is more than welcome. Tony, myself, and Sean from Public Works of the town of Hamden, and he was going to try to have the town manager there, and that's set for May 5th, so we can start the conversations of turning the road over, getting the road turned over to the town of Hamden. And I know Mr. Bouchard is excited to do so also. And then, of course, the final documentation and invoices came in on the road and the pump station. So I wanted to have Tony go over that because he's been working with them on that.
George touched on the costs, the application for payment from Sergeant, $221,476. That leaves retainees that'll be held for a year of around $83,084. Last time I checked with CES, who checked the road, it has stayed flat. The drains are working properly. I really don't see any reason why the road and the pump station should not be accepted at this point.
That's great news, Tony. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So they really didn't have the frost heave issue this winter?
No, the drains must have worked. It was like all the last few years, they've been strange winters, but no, there was one that went down a little, one came up a little bit. I think it'll be accepted.
And I apologize. Did you give us the timetable for that?
We're meeting, as Mike said, May 5th with the town, the Public Works, and hopefully the town manager and CES, I believe, right, Mike, to go over, to begin the process.
Start the conversation. So
Yep.
it's the Public Works and Nate from CES. And I've traveled that road quite a bit all winter, and I didn't see it move at all. So, yeah, it was, but I do want to thank Bangor because the pump station, Bangor really helped out with this pump station. We struggled the last couple months trying to find somebody to monitor it and take care of it while we had it. And Bangor has really helped us out with that. And especially Kathy. I had to reach out to Kathy. So I do want to thank him because that pump station was kind of, we were really struggling with the monitor of that and getting things taken care of. And Kathy really helped us out on that. So thank you,
what it was, this was Tony, was alarms. And there weren't that many alarms, but we wanted to make sure we had somebody standing by to respond to them. And we have 13 pump stations here in town. And a lot of times the alarms will be tripped either by a very short power outage or a power surge. The alarms didn't amount to a whole lot in the pump station in question. It doesn't take much to trip the alarm systems. That's all I have, Karen.
Great. Thank you very much.
Karen?
Both of you. Yeah, Sophie.
While George's recommendation included moving money to cover this expense, we have not had a formal vote on this expense, which would be helpful when we go to transfer the money.
So I would then, that superior recommendation, accept a motion to make the payment of listed in George's report, the $212,000 payment.
$221,476 is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Any comments? Other further questions for Tony or Mike? Okay. John, can you call a roll vote?
Absolutely. Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Yes.
thanks, Irene. Dana,
Dana, I unmuted you.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff.
and Kathy,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
and Karen.
Yes. We're getting better at that. Thanks, John. We'll have it down by the end of the meeting, hopefully. All right.
Can I just say one, Irene and Dana, I can unmute you during that roll call too.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. That might even speed things further. All right, moving on. We have the treasurer's report. Sophie, you're up.
So let's see how fast I can make this report. We had a wonderful finance committee meeting. We received an update from our investment advisors. We currently have $8,160,224 invested. I was looking for just exciting new positive news, and we just don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that the money is safe for right now. We've got locked in very safe investments. So I think at this point, the plan is to keep it going until the advisors see clear indication of stability in the market that is advantageous for us to start investing differently. We got an update about the short-term loan that we have issued, all the reimbursements and the current costs. Reviewed the budget, and actual expenses were about 35% expended. Budget looks pretty good for this year. And the billed member dues actually meet the budget estimate, which is always a great thing. And we reviewed $31,455.46 of operating expenses. Does not include the payment to Sergeant that we just talked about. So that is something that the group is recommending, that we go ahead and pay the payables. I think everybody had a list of the payables in their packet. And then the last thing that we talked about was just operationally kind of a shift in the way we are making the member distributions, that our members shouldn't see any changes, but we're going to be doing it through our bookkeeper as opposed to through a wealth management company. That's all I have.
Oh, that's a question.
Is a motion in order to move the payables for $31,340.75?
Thank you for that, Bob. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second to approve the payables. Tony maybe has a question.
Can I just
Yes.
correct, not to be obnoxious, but it would be nice, Bob, if you could do the 31,455.46, because that includes
That
an
includes
invoice that we've
Verizon.
already, yep.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I amend my motion to include $114.71 that's already been paid to Verizon.
Yeah. And Karen,
And that was second. And Tony, you have a question?
I have a CES invoice that I forwarded March 31st, and I don't see the amount.
Tony,
Yes,
I renegotiated that invoice. I apologize.
okay.
Okay, so we're good with the motion and the second with the dollar amount that Bob provided? And any other comments or questions? All right, roll call, John.
Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene, we're just unmuted, Irene. Is that a yes, Irene?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Dana,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
All right, unanimous.
Thank you, John. Okay. Moving on, we are now at item 7 on the agenda, which is the report from our esteemed Executive Director, Mike Carroll.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I'm going to go over a brief high-level overview report for you today because we do have Coastal/Fiberite joining us as guests. They're starting to log on now, so they're going to go over things also. So MRC's first quarter, overall, things seem to be running well throughout the first quarter. Many of the improvements, DCNs, are being worked on, and some of the minor ones have been completed. The recent COVID-19 virus has caused some things to be delayed and put on hold until outside contractors can travel again. Coastal, along with NACE, like many other essential services, have had to step up and ensure they had the proper protocols in place to deal with the pandemic and keep their employees safe. Coastal currently has a staff of just over 50, presently working 12-hour shift. During the first quarter, Coastal Resources had 14 bypass days out of 70 and a half operational days. 7 of these bypass days were due to the COVID virus, the facilities getting procedures and policies into place. 3 of the days were due to the propane incident, and 4 of the days were due to minor repairs, which those 4 days only affected a handful of members. Coastal recently completed its mass balance test and still compiling the data. 250 tons of MSW was run in 8.5 hours, processing at an average of 33 to 35 tons per hour. I'll give you an update on our side of the MRC short-term loan that we issued. On Monday, April 13th, the final funds of just over 31,000 of the 1.5 million were transferred to CRM's operating account. Since March 6th, when the loan was issued, Coastal requested 9 draws off the 1.5 million. Each request was reviewed for the purpose it was being used for before released. Prior to the next release, it was verified that those funds were used for that purpose before the next release was made. Overall, this process went very well, working with their bookkeeping side. We had a couple little hiccups on reconciliations, but that was just due to a couple days overlapping. But other than that, the process went very well. About $1,300,977 went to of the 1.5 million went to paying of vendors. Just over 100,000 was in closing costs and about 100,000 in DCN. I'll let Coastal provide you when they give their update on how the bondholders' loans going with the repayment to the MRC. Some first quarter stats. MRC joining members delivered 17,145 tons in Q1. That's up 521 tons, over 2.2% over Q1 of 2019. MSW was up about 200 tons per month for each January, February, and March in 2020 over 2019. And the rolling 12-month average is 0.6% over April 2018 to March 2019. One thing we will be watching for is, with everything going on, is seasonal MSW from towns. My guess is Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, Orono, and other vacation and university destinations will have significant drops in their tonnage over the next couple of months and summer. So we'll be keeping our eye on that each quarter to see how that goes. What I talking to Shelby the other day and going over the reports, on some really good news is their diversion rates on the reuse. March was 66%, which was up 17% from February. So as these improvements start, we're really seeing those diversion rates go up from when we had done our performance test back in September. So that's good to see. That's all I have on the executive director's report. Any questions on that?
I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions for Mike? Nothing.
That was easy.
It was so good. So complete. Well,
super.
I just want to say to everybody what an exceptional job. I think people realize what an exceptional job Mike has been doing. He has been juggling many balls over these past many months, especially within the last 4 to 6 weeks. It's just been a phenomenal level of effort that he's put in. And I mean, we've said it before, but I'll say it again because it bears repeating that we just are so fortunate that he came our way and that we managed to get a hold of him and that he's doing the work that he's doing. We would not be where we are without his guidance and his oversight and management. I just really bow down to you, Mike. Thank you so much for all that you're doing.
And
Thank you. You're making me blush.
I agree with Karen. Coastal wouldn't be where they are today without Mike's assistance.
Here, here.
Yeah, and it's been a really great team effort, and we appreciate being able to provide that guidance to Coastal and help. You know, we're all working together, hopefully rowing in the same direction to get to the fantastic end product that we know is out there. Just working towards that.
I'd also like to say that the newbie, Mr. Butler, is appreciated as well.
Wow.
Yes, he is.
Thank you.
His financial insights.
He's forgot more than I know.
He's forgotten more. He's forgotten a lot more than he knows too. Thank you, Tony.
Way done that.
And I forgot, I meant to start off the meeting by wishing everybody a happy Earth Day.
Yes.
Yes.
50th anniversary, no less.
Right.
And I did appreciate Coastal. I don't know if people saw the Constant Contact or Facebook post they put out yesterday about how they're accepting recycling now from communities across the state, which is great. Very nice little announcement there to coincide with the Earth Day date. So,
yeah, thank you, Shelby.
all right. So moving on, we do now have an update and a report from Coastal Resources of Maine and Fiberite. We have Steve Davey and Carl Knowlton. I will let you both introduce yourselves and let us know what your titles and roles are with those companies. And give us a little update on how things are going on the facility front and on the financing front and any other front that you want to give us insights to.
Hi, this is Steve Davey. Good morning, everybody. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Fiberite LLC. Listening in is Shelby Wright and Craig Stewart Paul. They're not panelists. And Carl is a panelist, and we're expecting Alan to join at any moment. So I sent Alan a note so he can give you an update on what's happening on the operations side, with the project side, and with the beneficial use work. So hopefully he'll be, actually, I think he just joined. Is that you, Alan?
I'm on, yes, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to, Alan is on just in time. Alan, you can introduce yourself. And Carl, when you want to talk about the bridge loan, you can introduce yourself. So why don't we start with Alan with the update on ops, beneficial use, et cetera.
Sure. I'm Alan Iantaska. I'm VP Engineering and Projects for Fiberite. Good morning. And I can give you an update on the plant ops. So as you would expect, after shutting down for a few days to establish the safe work practices in light of COVID-19, which include things like social distancing, obviously wearing masks. We implemented staggered breaks, additional cleaning, sanitation procedures, and so on. As you might expect, the plant is up and running and has been operating essentially at normal capacity. So, with that short interruption, everything is running at the plant at the moment, taking in waste just like normal. Just trying to get into the meeting here, sorry. So that's, the long and short of it on operations. We obviously, bringing in contractors and working is a little bit challenged. We can't bring any vendors in from out of state, but we are, we have Atlantic Recycling in, which is commissioning the compactor this week as well. So anything we can
Alan,
do.
you look like you're in a witness protection program there. We can only see a on your head.
There's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that. Okay. Well, we can hear you loud and clear.
No, sorry, it's the room that I'm in. It's I guess a little sunny where it's sitting, but. So that's the update for operations. Doing the best we can under the circumstances. The staff is responding very well. We're getting enough people to run the plant, and we've implemented 12-hour shifts on the MRF in order to make that happen.
Does anybody have a question? Any questions for Alan?
On the ops part.
The ops.
Alan, can you briefly go over some of the DCNs that, some of the major DCNs that over the last month, like the compactor type thing and what you expect to see out of that?
Can you
Sure.
define DCN, please?
Design change notice. It's a process that we have implemented for any design changes to make sure that, all the engineering protocols, everything, all the specs, everything is, consistent with what the rest of the plan is designed and constructed for. So we have a process that we go through, and also for justification financially for all projects. Just the acronym is DCN, Design Change Notice.
So for a layperson, that would just mean like improvements or investments into the plant.
Correct. So any improvement that we make at the plant, we want to make sure that there's a return on any capital investment that we make. So we have to go through that process and approvals to make sure that project is appropriate.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good question. Sometimes we use the acronyms, we forget that we're using them every day, and we forget that other folks haven't actually been involved in that. So thanks for asking that. So on the priority side, we're obviously prioritizing the projects to get the rate up in the plant. That's most important. So we're working on those. The one we're working at now, I mentioned earlier, the compactor. Part of the problems we had was that with the residue, the composition of the residue that we were seeing, we were getting less weight on the trailers. So therefore, the per ton cost for transportation was high. So we've actually purchased and installed a compactor from Atlantic Recycling. Atlantic Recycling's in the plant yesterday and today, doing the final commissioning on the compactor. So we should be able to start loading that toward the end of the week with the loader and get the weight up on the trailers to close to 30 tons. So therefore, our per ton price is, where we need it to be on the transportation. So that's happening, like I said, this week. We've made a number of deposits on other priority projects, mostly to try to get the long lead items placed so we can, when they come in, we can actually get those installed. So we have, the balance of those projects will be implemented on completion of this next phase of funding, which Carl will talk about shortly.
Alan, I have a question for you about the plant. I don't know if you have the answer, but I'm sort of curious about how visible the volume increases have been at the plant in terms of residential and waste, or has it been offset by decreases in commercial waste?
Shelby's probably in a better position to answer that, but I think it seems to be consistent with where everyone's seeing. I don't know if it's an actual 20% increase on residential, but as far as the normal volumes, they definitely have that balance where we are getting reduction in commercial waste and an increase in the residential. The overall volume it seems to be consistent where we were before, but it's definitely, I think, following that trend. I think the rest of the country is that way as well.
Thank you.
So, Mike, does that answer your question on?
Yeah, I mean, yep, yeah, I do appreciate that. One thing, Karen, also is a lot of our members over the last several weeks have called me to let me know that they are to do social distancing and to keep things down at their transfer stations. A lot of the smaller members, they are just mixing everything and not taking in, not separating things at their transfer stations. So that would increase the residential also a little bit. And I've probably received at least 10 or 12 of those calls over the last few weeks. And thank you, Alan.
Yeah, one thing to note is, because of that, the plant situation, talking to the contractors as we implement the DCNs, we also have to keep in mind that the contractors coming into the plant also have to adhere to those requirements. So it's, we have to make sure that when we bring the contractors in to do the work, we're scheduling that appropriately and having them abide by the same rules as the plant personnel. Just to let you know, that's what we're planning on doing for the implementation of the balance of the DCN.
Yeah, Karen, you need to mute, but Mike alluded to this earlier in a conversation we had before we started meeting with you, and you may wish to pass this on to someone else, but there is concern about the summer tonnages. They're going to be down this year. No one knows how much, but they are going to be down. Do you see that affecting you at all?
Well, obviously, we want to make sure that we keep the plant as full as possible. So, that's not my area so much. Shelby may be able to comment on that. But as far as, I know generally, obviously, we want to keep the plant full. So we'd be looking to see how, what options we have to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Alan? All right, Alan, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Alan, would you like to give an update on the beneficial use, or is that something that you've already covered off, Mike?
No, I mean, I just soon Alan give an update, and then I can, if there's anything that's happened in the last 24 hours, I'll that Alan's not aware of, I'll add to it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so we've been working actually together with the MRC and others to try to get the beneficial use permit or license issued as soon as we can. We've working with the DEP hand in hand. The latest status of that license is that for both products, for the pulp and the briquettes, the DEP is doing a final internal review on the final draft of the license. It was being reviewed over the long weekend, and we're expecting that draft to be issued any day now. I haven't got an exact ETA. I saw some correspondence even as late as an hour ago, and we haven't actually gotten an ETA on it, but it should be any time now. Hopefully today, but we're in discussions and contact with the DEP, as well as I know Mike has also been in contact with them, trying to get this latest draft issued as soon as we can, so we can get moving on the test burns and get that work completed.
Yes, I actually spoke with David Burns this morning, and he actually said he'd send us Coastal and MRC all a email or a letter saying that the license is actually, that the DEP is actually in the process, in the stages of processing a beneficial use license to Coastal. So
I did have communication I did have communication with Dave this morning, Mike, so you should hopefully be receiving that anytime now.
Okay, great. David called me back and we just needed Coastal's permission for him to release that to the MRC. So I called Alan early this morning and asked him if he'd do that. I was hoping to have it for this meeting, but I'm expecting it any time.
Yeah,
Tony, do you
I
have
did
a
do that.
Thank you, Alan. Tony, do you have a question?
Yeah, Mike, that means the license has been approved.
I was told that we would receive documentation that they are, the EP is in the stages of processing a license to Coastal. So my interpretation of that is yes, Tony.
That would be my interpretation as well. Thank you.
Carl, would you like to update the MRC on your activities around the bridge loan?
Certainly. Thank you, Steve. Good morning to each of you. Carl Knowlton, Vice President, Head of Corporate Development and Asset Management at Fiberite. I'll be providing an update of Coastal's efforts to raise additional capital to advance the profitability improvement plan. We have been providing periodic updates to Mike, so I'll keep my comments at a higher level. And I'll give an update across some commercial topics and some other matters that I think the board might appreciate. A few comments on schedule. We continue to work with our bondholders and their advisors toward a prompt closing and funding of the bridge loan. Coastal continues to conduct multiple conference calls each week with the trustees council, company council, and FAME council to advance detailed structuring of the bridge loan. The bondholder group is organizing a conference call later today or tomorrow to seek to finalize the structure in terms of the loan. The outcome of this bondholder discussion is very important and will really inform our view as to the timing of closing. The legal teams are working to complete the required loan documentation, supportive of a closing and funding as early as Friday. All the material transaction documents have been drafted and have been circulated for review and comment. And Fiberite has developed a first draft of bondholder required disclosure that describes the commercial aspects of the plant, the transaction for the benefit of the bondholders. And we expect to distribute this document later on today. On some commercial topics, the profitability improvement plan has now been reviewed by 2 independent technical consultants. Both have provided bondholders with supportive opinions. The amount of the bridge loan has been increased to $14.75 million from $10 million. The increase in the amount doesn't reflect an expansion of the profitability improvement program. Rather, it provides additional reserves to address uncertainties regarding how the COVID virus might slow completion of the profitability improvement plan or delay the scheduled deliveries of equipment. It also funds additional reserves requested by the bondholders. A couple of other items that are important. We have identified 100% of the bondholders. That's important because it supports the requirement that we gain unanimous consent to the issuance of the taxable Series 2020 bonds on a priority basis. The bondholders, trustee, and legal counsels have agreed to an expedited consent process that should not impact our closing schedule. And finally, bondholders have requested that the bonds be qualified to trade publicly, and we're working to accommodate this bondholder requirement. That's my high-level comments. I hope that's helpful. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Carl? Nobody? George? You unmuting yourself? There you go.
Yeah, no, just, I mean, there had been some issues discussed about commercial issues related to agreements with the MRC, about there might be some things that needed to come to the board. At this point, is there anything that the board needs to do in terms of action on any of the agreements before the closing, or are those issues addressed?
George, I think we'll have a better sense once we get some feedback from the bondholder call either later today or tomorrow. What I would suggest is that I circle back with you and debrief with you and Mike across anything that comes or results from that bondholder call.
Okay, but nothing definitive at this time.
At this point, we're not aware of anything, yes.
Okay.
So Karen, with that concludes the comments we thought we would make to the MRC with an update on coastal resources.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions for any of the panelists from Coastal or Fiberite?
I have a comment, if I may.
Yes, Bob.
I'm measurably far more relieved today than I was a month and a half ago. I am very encouraged by the way all these entities are working together to make this work. And I'm impressed, and I appreciate all the work that's being done to pull this together.
Thank you, Bob. I would concur with that sentiment. We're pleased that you guys are, the closing on the financing is imminent, and that your improvements are underway, and that we're working towards that light at the end of the tunnel. And I would also like to congratulate you all on your 1-year anniversary of operations. So a year ago today, took the first load of waste across the scales.
Wow.
Now, how far you've come, how we've all come.
Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate.
Thank you very much
today.
for your time.
Yes, our pleasure.
You're welcome to hang on, or you can
Yeah.
go get some business done.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to probably check out myself, but Mike, if you need us later, you know how to get me.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank
And
you
stay
all.
safe, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Next up, we have a legislative report from Dan Walker at Pretty Flaherty. Dan?
Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me well? Fine?
Could be a little closer.
Yeah. Okay. Is that better? No. Yeah, this is quite a legislative session. I thought, it was, I think between Shelby and Mike and I think we did a good job of keeping the perspective of the MRC and of the new facility out there and in front of legislators and the DEP and the administration, so they did not forget who you are, which is, with everything you're going through, it's, everyone's got their own little worlds, and we need to constantly remind them that there's this new facility out there that's really changing the way that waste is handled in the state. And sometimes you've got these committees and folks in Augusta that just forget about it and go steaming along like nothing's ever changed. So I think those guys did an especially good job of coming to Augusta and sharing that perspective. We held a tour for legislators in December or late November. I think it was early December. And I think we got several legislators very fired up to help, which was good, including Dick Campbell, who hasn't always been, I think he's been a wonderful advocate for the region, but I think we really got him in a good place, as well as some other local ones, especially folks on the ENR committee. We had also tried to get the administration in for some tours, but I think one thing or another led to them not getting there, but we pushed for it. But I think the fact that we had legislators there early on was super helpful in making sure that your perspective got shared as we went into the legislative session. I'm just going to go into the key bills that we worked on for you through the session. We'll send around a final report that will circulate. I'll send it to Mike and to Shelby, and then that can be circulated. But I think this showed, I've been working with you all for a long time now, close to 15 years. And I think back, when I first started, we would show up with PERC the MRC, and we would provide the perspective from the municipal perspective, from the facility perspective. And I think we've done a good job in kind of going back to that, where you get I think the committee gets a full perspective on this process. And I think we accomplished that. So the first bill I'm going to talk about is LD 401. That was just originally was just a concept draft, and it was and the committee utilized it to finalize some changes they wanted to see in solid waste policy, along with the DEP. So that if you look, if you were to simply look it up, it looks like a concept draft, but it was amended. And the key piece of that amendment was it did some things. That it redefined recycling facility, redefined waste generated within the state. But most importantly, what it did was it provides that at least 50% of the waste characterized as recycled by a solid waste processing facility that generates residue requiring disposal must have been reused or recycled through methods other than landfilling. And so in the past that had been, and for a while there, you had been able to achieve your 50% requirement, you've been able to utilize alternative daily cover at the landfill. This said that no, you can only use 50% of that 50% requirement for that. And we pushed really hard on this, against this. The committee ended up providing a specific exception for the re-energy facility in Lewiston, and because they basically so they created an exception for construction and demolition debris that it's more of a phase-in for them. We worked really hard with the DEP, with the committee, to create a specific exception for you all. But what they wanted to go forward with was basically to utilize the DEP's discretion, basically prosecutorial discretion. And they committed to us on mic, before the committee, that they would work with you in the first couple years of the CRM facility, because our point is that once this gets going, we're not going to have an issue with the 50%. But in these early years, especially with the fact that the beneficial reuse permit had not been, it still hasn't been, but we're getting a lot closer, hasn't been issued yet, that we're going to have to use the alternative daily cover for the recycling requirement. So anyway, we got a strong commitment from the DEP on mic before the committee that they would work with us within the first year or so. And so that bill was passed and is law now. That's LD 401. The next bill was LD 988. So this bill removes the exemption to the MSW disposal surcharge for MSW generated by a municipality that owns the landfill accepting it, or that is entered into a contract with a term longer than 9 months for the disposal of MSW in that landfill capacity. So this basically removed any type of exceptions to landfill surcharges for MSW. This bill, and let me take a major step backwards, and I apologize. The legislature adjourned very abruptly in mid-March and left a lot of work undone. And all the work that was undone at that point, including this LD 988, was carried over into any special session that they may or may not have. Right now, if it were up to the legislature, I don't think there would be a special session, because if the legislature pushes forward with a special session, it requires a motion by the presiding officers, but then it also requires a vote of the majority of the caucuses. So it needs to be agreement between the Ds and the Rs. I don't believe the Rs want to come back at this point. So if we're up to the legislature, they wouldn't come back. So this is going to be a call. If they come back, this is going to be a call from the governor. And she has said in her official statements that she will bring them back when it is safe to do so. When that happens, we don't know. And when they do come back, we're pretty sure it's not going to be a fully, full legislative session. So there's a lot of these bills that are out there that still need a lot of work. So anyway, that's my step back. I'm going to take a step forward again. So LD 988, the bill I was just talking about, has been carried over, but there was a vote of the committee. The Ds voted for it, the Rs voted against it, and the exception is that they made an exception for Aroostook County and the landfill up there, and all the towns would bring their landfill. They didn't want to surcharge them. They felt that was unfair because they didn't have any other options, was the point. Okay, that's LD 988. LD 2104 was a bill that really dominated the ENR committee. And this is the bill and that also this bill was created by the committee this session, but it came out of the study of packaging programs, municipal packaging programs that went over the fall. There was a series of listening meetings and stakeholders meetings throughout the fall, and the DEP then came to the committee at the beginning of session and said, we're not ready. We think we need another year to develop a stewardship program for packaging products, for recycling of packaging products. So what did the committee do? They said full speed ahead. They wanted the DEP, even though the DEP wasn't prepared to do it. So they put forward some legislation. It was worked, and we worked very closely with the committee to make sure it worked for the municipalities and for the CRM facility, that the CRM facility was recognized. It actually, what they wanted to do really works well with the CRM facility and its ability with the MRC to track waste and the amounts of waste. But what happened is they were getting to a point where they were getting closer to getting something that seemed to work. The DEP had just provided a major rewrite of the bill. There had been a couple days of public hearings, a number of days of work sessions, and this got right to the point at the end of March where the House Chair, Ralph Tucker, basically said, that's it, no more discussion. The legislature's going, this is on a Thursday or Friday, we're going home on Tuesday. This is as far as we're getting it. We're going to pass this thing right here. But again, the bill they never finished drafting the bill. They never got it to a final point. It ended up being the Democrats on the committee voted for where the bill was at that point. The Rs wanted to change it into a continued study, continue to work with the DEP for the DEP to then present, like they originally wanted to, a proposal at the end of the session. So that bill also got carried over into whatever special session will be voted on by the governor. So those were the three big bills. I'll send around to Mike in the next week or so, kind of a full outline of all the bills we were tracking. A couple other things though. So we worked closely with the administration as they started to develop these shelter-in-place orders, and I put shelter in place as a quote because they're not exactly shelter-in-place orders, to make sure that MSW disposal activities were included under essential activities. So we worked on that. We also had an executive order slip by everybody, and I had a specific discussion with the Deputy Commissioner of the DEP, Melanie Loisum, around the executive order, which is allowing for waste that is sent to a waste to energy facility to be considered recycling. Apparently that's not exactly working great for the waste to energy facilities, but what's happening and what I learned from the Deputy Commissioner of the DEP is that, a lot of communities are trying, and you guys are all on the front lines on this, wanting to shut down transfer stations, not wanting to sort because they didn't want to touch the waste. But this is what it's really doing, is creating a phenomenal opportunity for the MRC and CRM to bring in other communities, which sounds like it's happening to some extent. So I'll leave it at that. My last little thing I'll say is that it's never too early to start thinking about what we want to do for the next legislative session. I think the process that you all went through, really CRM went through around this beneficial use permit process was crazy that it took so long. It seems like that could be streamlined, especially for a facility like CRM, which is going to be developing products as you go along. To wait a year to get something permitted does not seem like it will work. And I think there's a real opportunity to look at that process and potentially put in legislation. What often happens is potentially it may not change it, but at least it puts the DEP up there and says, okay, how are you going to improve this? We have a facility that's creating new products and we want to bring them into the market rapidly. How are we going to do that? So I would say that could be an idea going forward. And I think people should just keep in the back of their minds other ideas that we could propose next year. But obviously we're in a whole new world here. There's a whole new set of ideas that could be presented. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Thank you all.
Any questions then for anybody? All right. Appreciate that update. Moving on to the committee reports, which Mike will kind of take the lead on that. We've got the Communications Committee and the Waste Flow Committee. Not a lot of action happening on those, but there's a few little tidbits.
Yes. Thank you, Karen. And on the Communications Committee, you're right. There's not a lot of activity. We met with CES. Jessica came up from the Southern office and we did the annual website review, and she's just really minor changes on that, just updating things in documents, and that's work in progress, but most of those things have been done, and getting the asset management letters up and all that type of thing. The MRRA conference has been rescheduled for October 26th and 27th. And the notice, I will probably be putting a letter together and just reminding members, I mean, it's been in our newsletter and everything else, but reminding members of the price increase on the dues July 1st. So I'll probably be sending a notice out in May on that, just reminding everybody that the dues will be going up on July 1st. That's really it for the communications. Is there any questions on the communications? Kathy, is your hand up? Yep. Kathy? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, now I'm unmuted. The question I have is that the first notice that people are getting of the dues increases, and how does that fit with other people's budget process? Maybe they've already gotten it.
This will be the first notice, but we did put it in our newsletter and we had voted on it in our meeting. I don't remember which meeting. It was a few board meetings ago, I believe. So it was been advertised in the newsletter, and of course it's in our minutes, and then this will be the first notice.
Have you had any comments about that?
We had one gentleman come in, I believe it was our December meeting, and it was Steve from the Booth Bay, just had commented that, you know, the CPI and the members' dues all going up in the same year. He had made a comment that he thought that was a little bit tough, but that's the only comment I've gotten feedback on since we've advertised it.
So the only thing I'd say is that a lot of people probably, which we found out during the planning process through all this, is a lot of people don't read what we send them, but
Okay.
something specific to the dues increase sooner rather than later, because they're getting, I mean, it's not that big a deal on most people's budgets, but just because sooner rather than later, something formal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I will take care of that, Kathy. Anything else?
Dana, did you have a question?
Dana, do you have a question, or are you just moving your camera?
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
My camera was tipping over.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, and then the waste flow committee, I've talked to Tony a little bit, but like I said, there's not really much to talk about there. We are going to monitor during this what's going on just to see if what the volumes look like going into the plant in the residential and the commercial. But other than that, there's really not much going on in the waste flow committee. And that's all I have on those.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
Yeah.
We've come to the end of our regular open part of the agenda. Right now, our next meeting is our next regularly scheduled quarterly board meeting, which is set for July 22nd. The regular board meeting would start at 10, would be preceded as usual at 9 a.m. by the Finance Committee meeting, which that.
Oh. Karen, you got muted.
All right, so let me try that again. Sorry about that. So we're come to the end of our regular agenda. Next meeting scheduled for July 22nd. Location is to be determined. And the meeting as usual, the regular quarterly board meetings start at 10 a.m. and are preceded by the Finance Committee meeting at 9 a.m. At this time, be happy to take any public comments. If you've got a comment, you can put it in the Q&A section. I don't know if we've gotten anything in that, Jesse?
Not a question that needed to be addressed, but we did get a question that came over email from me after somebody registered, and
Okay.
it's from Larry Sikora. So I'm really sorry if I butchered your name, Larry. He's with the transfer station in China, and he's trying to discern the reason for the $10 million that Coastal Resources is obtaining. And he's read about the permit delays and contractor changes, but there should not be a huge amount of outlay, or do they? And then his second part of his question is, are there any design changes requiring large sums of money? And if so, what is the reason for the change?
Mike, would you be willing to sort of give an overview of the rationale for this $10 million, well, now $14 million loan that Coastal's taking, and what they're planning to do with it, how they're going to invest it, and why it's needed?
And
Yeah.
Karen, we might want to point out it's not coming from us.
That's true.
Yeah. Yes. So that's what we'll start with is the loan's not coming from us. We gave them a short-term loan to get to the point where they can close on their larger loan and make this. So and these are rough numbers, but this is what I've seen over the time that we've looked at, because we've had to look everything over that they wanted to do to agree to the short-term loans so that they could go for the larger loan. And so I know there's anywhere from I believe it's $3 to $4 million just in upgrades, which is what they always refer to as the DCN. Those are improvements and efficiencies to the plant. And a lot of that is to learning the waste and making on the reuse. They've had to change things so that the potential buyers, it's a product that the potential buyers want and can use. And like I said, a lot of it's been learning the waste. I mean, this plant was a lot different than the PERC plant where everything got pushed into a boiler. So they've had to change a lot of design changes due to the types of waste, like the tarps and the pipe and the hoses and that type of thing that comes in. And then also, yes, a big portion of the money is due to delays. There's over $1 million spent just in some of the disposal and the transportation while waiting for these permits of some of these materials that could be sold as reuse. So I would say a major portion of the money, at least a quarter to almost half of it, is in for changes as in learning the waste or making the material for the reuse specific to the potential buyer. And then the rest of it has been tied up in the delays or having to deal with the disposal of some of these products that could be going out as reuse if they had the permit.
Tony, you had a question?
Mike, you said potential buyers. Buyers of what?
buyers of pulp, buyers of briquettes,
Gotcha.
that
Awesome.
type of thing, ramping up for the gas. So
Yep.
that type of thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jesse, were there other parts of that question that we haven't addressed?
I think that's it, but I was just going to offer to Larry, I hope that addresses your questions. And if you want, you can certainly probably give Mike a call and delve
Yes,
into
definitely.
details.
Thank you.
And I just want to say that we did stream this on Facebook, and there were not any questions that came in under the comments there either.
Oh, good. Thank you for reminding me of that. Did anybody get on that? Did you see? Pay attention?
Yep, we had at one point 4 people watching, and it reached over 200 people. So
Great.
actually
Wow.
pretty well.
Nice. Okay, well, with that, we are scheduled next to do an executive session. And I will say that right now, we only have one item that we're expecting to address after the executive session, which is a review of the extension letter regarding integral capabilities for performance test protocols. And Mike, I think that is still the case, right? We're not anticipating other actions to come out of executive session, are we?
No.
Not necessarily.
No.
Okay.
No.
So with that, I would entertain a motion from somebody.
I move we convene in executive session pursuant to
I'm gonna check
MRS
out.
4056E to consult with legal counsel regarding contractual rights and duties.
Second.
Thank you. Got a motion and a second. All in favor, John? Do we have a roll? Are you
Yeah,
still?
I'll do a roll call. Roll call. So Bob,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Irene,
Jess, I can't unmute Irene and Dana because I made you the host already. You've been to-
oh, okay.
Right.
Dana said yes.
Thanks, Dana. Irene, can you nod your head yes? I'll move on. I think I'll come back to Irene. Kathy,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
and Irene, can you hear me? Is that a yes on your end? I think it is. I think that is a yes.
Oh, there she is. She's unmuted.
Okay, yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic.
So with that, we'll move into executive session. And just as a reminder, people will need to leave this current meeting. And there's a little icon that says leave. And in your email inbox is an invitation for another executive session meeting, which you'll need to join to enter that other meeting. Does that
And,
cover it, Jesse?
yes, but if you don't mind, remember, when we go back from executive session, don't delete this original email you got last night, because this is the session we're going to rejoin after executive session. So you're going to leave this session. You're going to leave this session. You're going to click on the link that Jesse just sent you recently, like in the last 10 minutes. And then when you leave that session, you're going to go back to this session by going to that original email you got yesterday.
Thank you.
And there's a question.
Joelle?
Joelle?
Do you want me logged into the executive session for the overview memo? I did not receive the invite.
Oh, I didn't.
I can forward it to you.
I think they're individualized though.
Yep, they are.
This one is not. This one is because it's not a webinar. It's just like a regular.
Oh, it's a meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
So we can leave meeting.
Yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, for attending, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Jessica, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'm gonna log out, and then when I rejoin, can you make me the host again?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
No problem.
And I'm going to pause this so it's not just like it's on Facebook right now.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Irene, you have to go down to the bottom right and you have to hit leave meeting. And Ralph, you do too. And then there's an email for a new link in your email. It should be in the bottom right. It said leave meeting in red.